Torture and terrorism. Donald Trump wants to fight fire with fire. Tonight, U.S. allies are warning, don't ignite an inferno that you can't put out. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin, and this is The Day.
Well, I think that this would be a step backward, and I'm not alone in thinking that.
Well, I think the director of the CIA has made it clear he's going to follow the law.
We have a very clear position on torture. We do not sanction torture. We do not get involved with that, and that will continue to be our position.
And torture is illegal, and torture is not legal. And we agree with it not being legal.
That the path he's going down is wrong. It is not about our values as a country.
I'm very concerned that we will lose the U.S. voice as a defender of human rights around the world.
I am not afraid to speak frankly to a President of the United States. I am able to do that because we have that special relationship.
Also on the show, Germany remembers those who were murdered in the Nazis' rehearsal for the Holocaust. That's coming up a little bit later. We begin the day with fighting fire with fire. U.S. President Trump says the best way to extinguish terrorism may be to do exactly what the terrorists do. In his first television interview since taking office, Trump said that he, quote, absolutely believes torture works. He said that includes the controversial and illegal practice of waterboarding. Here's part of what the U.S. president said in that interview.
But I have spoken as recently as 24 hours ago with people at the highest level of intelligence, and I asked them the question, does it work? Does torture work? And the answer was yes, absolutely. I want to do everything within the bounds of what you're allowed to do legally. But do I feel it works? Absolutely, I feel it works.
And then John McCain. Well, the president went on to say that he will defer to the Pentagon and the CIA to determine what works best. But his comments reportedly caught his cabinet off guard and forced U.S. allies to publicly reiterate their opposition to torture. In Washington, leading Democrats and Republicans in Congress wasted no time with pushing back. Here's U.S. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi.
Well, I think that this would be a step backward, and I'm not alone in thinking that the path he's going down is wrong. It is not about our values as a country, and don't ask me, just ask John McCain.
Well, U.S. Senator John McCain, he heard and he answered. The former prisoner of war and the Vietnam War veteran tweeted at the President of the United States, he can sign whatever executive orders he likes, but the law is the law. We're not bringing back torture. Well, I'm joined now at the big table by Fred Abrahams from Human Rights Watch. Fred, it's good to have you on the show. How do you read Trump's statements from last night? I mean, he believes that waterboarding works, but he says he's going to rely on his cabinet to determine if the policy should be reinstated.
Well, I read them with great distress. Look, anybody who thought that Trump, the candidate, would be different from Trump, the president, has had a rude awakening. Mm-hmm. And he is now following through on things that he said throughout the campaign, including on the use of torture.
In the campaign, though, he pulled back a little bit from, pushing to have this reinstated. But as you said last night, he came full on with that. What about the reports of Trump planning to lift the ban on CIA black site prisons? I mean, this is part of several programs that were stopped or restricted by President Obama.
Right. Well, I have never seen from the U.S. administration, any administration, such a spate, a flurry of human rights problematic policies as we saw in the last 72 hours. Mm-hmm. Torture, now potentially black site CIA prisons, secret prisons where we know abuse took place, not to mention immigration, refugee rights, and women's rights. So there has been not just a single shot, but an automatic gunfire from this president, now making very clear he's going to pursue policies that are both ineffective and potentially against the law.
What do you think is being given to him in terms of advice? Because we've had, a committee in Congress come out with its own report that says waterboarding torture does not work. I mean, the evidence is there. Do you think the president has been made aware of that, if he even knows that that exists?
Well, he's increasingly showing that he does not heed what is said by science, what is said by experts, including national security experts. So it's true at times when he nominated his Defense Secretary General Mattis, who said waterboarding and torture didn't work. Now he's backtracking a bit and saying potentially he's opened the door to accepting that it will. So I don't think this is someone who is necessarily listening to the experts, more listening to his gut and what he thinks the people want.
In your opinion, is this a president who is simply hell-bent on undoing much of what his predecessor did, or is there a Trump doctrine emerging here?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there's a natural reaction then to do everything, undo everything that his predecessor did. But I think there is also a certain doctrine, which is table thumping. And rallying the crowds with some of our greatest fears that are not justified, including the fears of terrorism. The numbers of Americans that have died in the United States has been small. It's not, of course, it's an issue. Security is a critically important issue, but to then blame refugees, to blame foreigners, to blame Muslims is, in my view, very misguided.
I mean, do you see a nexus here? I know I've seen a lot of commentators themselves mix up or conflate the notion of immigrants coming from Mexico with the threat of terrorism. I mean, is there a nexus, an artificial nexus here of threats being created?
I don't think so. I think what he has done is conflate two issues, which is immigration and criminality. Now, the U.S. does have a crime problem, but there's also a lot of domestic crime. People who are born and raised in the United States are American citizens, have nothing to do with immigration of the recent kind. But he's used those issues of crime to now justify what we think is a very problematic immigration reform, which is going to harm potentially millions of people who are in the United States, legally or unlegally, could be affected by these policies.
You know, your boss, Ken Roth, he said earlier today that he's afraid that Trump and his policies will result in losing the U.S. voice in the fight for human rights around the world. I heard him say that today, and it makes me wonder, how credible is that voice tonight?
Well, it may come as no surprise. I don't disagree with my boss, but I actually believe it as well, which is there are two issues here. You know, one is the direct impact. What will these policies mean for people in the United States and around the world? Direct result of these policies. The other is opening the door for abusive behavior. What he does now makes it much more possible for other abusive states and dictators around the world. What is Russia going to say, China, Sisi in Egypt, when they say, well, at least with all of the faults of the Obama administration, and let's not say it was a human rights perfect scenario, at least the United States stood generally for human rights and democratization, rule of law around the world, and that is being lost minute by minute with this new administration.
Usually when we have people from Human Rights Watch on the show, we're talking about the situation, in maybe a third world country, a developing country. It's rare that we're talking about what's going on inside the United States. Is that reality changing, though? Is the United States going to become a country where human rights could be, if not systematically, at least on a regular basis, abused?
Well, look, we've had problems in the past, under the Obama administration, lack of transparent drone strikes and very problematic immigration laws. But under this new administration, we are seeing something new. Even my colleagues who have worked for decades covering Africa, they say, you see, now that you know what we've been battling. I don't want to say we're there yet because the U.S. has checks and balances that other countries do not enjoy. But are we facing a new situation regarding human rights in this administration? I say absolutely yes.
All right, Fred Abrahams with Human Rights Watch. Fred, we appreciate you taking the time to be on the day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In one of his first executive actions, President Trump reinstated and widened the scope of what is dubbed the global gag rule. International NGOs that offer abortions or even information on abortion will not receive any form of U.S. government funding in the future. Now, here's how the White House justified that order.
We're standing up not just for life of the unborn, but for also taxpayer funds that are being spent overseas to perform an action that is contrary to the values of this president, and I think continue to further illustrate, not just to the folks here in this country, but around the world, of what a value we place on life.
All right, that was the White House press secretary speaking there. Well, now the Netherlands has called for a global fund to try to plug the shortfall that's created or could be created by Trump's order. Lilian Ploumen, the Minister for Foreign Trade and Development, spoke to DW earlier about the plans.
Well, what we're doing now, we're reaching out to countries that we know are very much interested in women's rights, governments that fund women's rights, to foundations, to ask them to contribute to make sure that we can fund the gap that is left behind by the global gag rule that President Trump has now ordered. And so it's a joint effort, and we do hope that we will be able to continue to support women, because it's not only about abortion, it's about much more. It's also about sexual education. It's about access to contraceptives. It's about helping women who are pregnant, giving them information. So it's a lot of services that are very dear to women and girls that are affected by this global gag rule.
That was the Dutch Minister for Trade and Development, Lilian Ploumen, speaking to DW earlier. All right, we're staying in the Netherlands now and with Donald Trump. Now, the Dutch, through their geography and their history, they have an instinct when it comes to knowing how to talk, maybe even entertain a global audience. Well, the comedy show Zondag met Lubach, Sunday with Lubach, is the latest proof. 10 million hits on YouTube for a very Dutch response to Trump's America First mantra. Take a look.
This is a message from the government of the Netherlands.
Dear Mr. President, welcome to this introduction video about the Netherlands. It's gonna be a great video. It's gonna be absolutely fantastic. We've got Pony Park Slagharen, which has got to be the best pony park in the world. It's true. They're the best ponies. They are. You can ride them. You can date them. You can grab them by the pony. It's fantastic. This is the Afsluitdijk. It's a great, great wall that we built to protect us from all the water from Mexico. In fact, we built an entire ocean, okay? An entire ocean between us and Mexico. Nobody builds oceans better than we do. We totally understand. It's going to be America first. But can we just say the Netherlands second? Is that okay?